The best exercises for strong bones are really a combination. I'm going to show you that based on a little formula that I came up with, just as a guide to what is going to help you maintain and even grow stronger bones, with all that other information I put up on osteoporosis in my videos. But before I do, I want to make it very clear. What often happens in these areas is you get a person who really likes going to the gym and saying, "Hello, this is what you do, this is what you do, this is all you need to do," and it's not. There is no one secret, magical, silver bullet. There is not. It's about understanding the whole process, which is why we have now 10 videos on osteoporosis for different aspects, so that everyone can understand how it all fits together. And when you look at the physical activity, which I'll go into in a moment, you have to consider all of those other items. If you're not considering your gut health, then it's not going to work. It's just not. If you're not considering diet, if you're not considering stress and poor sleep, then it's just not going to work. It's like a milkshake. Of course, here we'll go for a healthy milkshake or whatever you want to make it into a cocktail. It's got to be shaken up, and all the different combination of cocktails and things go together to make it work. All of those, including things like getting out in nature, getting sunlight, and even avoiding toxins. So the message is clear. It's about that full picture. Now, when it comes down to physical exercise, the best exercise for strong bones is really a combination. And I've been reading articles literally since the 1990s. And recently I've read dozens and dozens of the meta-analysis, the big studies that bring together, and lots of little studies. And I'm going to show you that over the next 30 or 40 minutes. But the formula that I've come up with is pretty simple. It starts off with, you've got three main factors: impact, resistance and weight bearing, and movement and metabolism. Now, what happens in all of these is that they are related to each other, and you need the three to get the maximum benefit. Unfortunately, we do. But impact is anywhere where your joints, where your body is actually getting full impact. So probably the best exercise for that, for example, is hopping, where you're getting the whole body weight going through one side, and then of course hop on the other side, and then hop, and then even different angles of hopping. As an example, now carrying weights, going up and down stairs, or at least going down on the stairs when you're stepping down, is a good example of that impact. And I'll go into a lot more detail on some of the examples. And then you've got the resistance and weight bearing. That probably comes in a very, very close second. And the resistance and weight bearing is lifting the weights. You know, going down, doing the squats, bringing up those heavy weights, because every time you do, it forces the osteoblasts to actually put bone on bone and to recycle using the osteoclasts to get that perfect balance of bone density, bone strength. And with those in common, and of course, when you've got impact and resistance, they go hand in hand anyway. Because if you're jumping up and down or going up and down stairs or hopping, you're getting a combination of both of those. And then the third one is movement and metabolism. Now, these are my terms. I say movement because just walking, just swimming. They are not great for the bones, but they do help maintain bone mineral density, bone strength. And of course, you need more than just one or two things. This is kind of the milkshake part of it, where the metabolism gets going. And we know metabolism plays a role because, again, just on cycling, where there is no impact and no resistance, that it's still going to reduce the bone loss, and which is what we're primarily after, and I'll explain that in a moment. But you've also got things in terms of metabolism. Heat, for example, increases the bone mineral density. Vibrations, and neither of those are movements, so to speak, increase bone mineral density. Even the timing of a meal after exercise or before exercise can impact the bone mineral density. So these are other things that come into the metabolic processes, and that can really make a difference. So, and of course, when you're doing impact, you're getting some movement anyway and metabolism. When you've got resistance, you're getting, so they're all important to build into a program together. And what's great is that in science, they normally look at one or two aspects. More recently, they've been putting 2 and 3 together. And so they've done studies where they've built these 3 things in together to show that they are the strongest and best way to actually build bone strength. Now, on the topic of bone strength, and with this, you've got to also remember that there's frequency, duration, and intensity. So doing one hop is good, but you probably need to do 50 or 60. So we've got things like the frequency, how often, duration, how long you're going to do it for, and when you go up those stairs or do that hop, are you going to include a little weight to do that as well? So those three things come into all of these factors we need to do. And so then we look at what are we trying to do? And what we're trying to do is build bone stiffness, bone strength. That's a term they use in the scientific studies, bone stiffness. We're trying to build bone strength so that if anything happens, we reduce the risk of fractures. And that's our final outcome, because we know that fractures as we get older are an increased risk for mortality and many other conditions out there. So we want to reduce fractures as much as possible. And so bone stiffness, reduce fractures. And one of the things that's really important to bear in mind, why I put it over here in blue, is one of the biggest factors in accidents is the people who are fearful of doing anything because they'll have an accident. And there are now plenty of studies showing that when they take people who are fearful and they give them a specialized program and they do what I'm describing to you now, under some supervision and guidance, you can get that from any gym and certainly lots of places that people can help you around there. You get a program and you work with them, it actually shows that they actually have less fractures than the people who are fearful and don't do anything. So my message is get out there and start doing. Do some on your own, the more the better in nearly all cases, and get out there and get a professional to assist you in this as well. So we want to reduce the fractures. And when it comes down to the fractures though, one of the important factors is to understand that it's not just about bone mineral density. Everyone hears about bone mineral density, osteoporosis, osteopenia. It's not. In fact, the actual studies show that 50% of people who have fractures don't have signs of osteoporosis. That's over 55. So what is it? Well, there are other factors in there like strength, the size, the strength and size of your muscles. And it's really important to understand that if you're going to fall over, you don't have those muscles in your legs and upper legs and lower back, then you are going to be more likely to trip over, fall over and fracture. The more likely you fall over, the greater the risk of fractures. And it could, no matter how strong your bones are. So the first thing is we want to make sure that we've got the strength in there and we've got the strength in those leg muscles in particular, because that's what stops us falling over. Now, when we fall over, we also want the strength in the arm muscles and the upper body muscles, because that also stops the fractures and so on. Helps, depends on how we land, a whole raft of things out there. So the message is we need to also build up on strength, our balance, flexibility, and flexibility is, everyone knows, kind of stretching, but mobility I put in there as my little model, because mobility is about the ability to do the things we normally do comfortably. So getting up and out of a chair and moving around and going up and down those stairs, whatever is required, mobility is really important to be able to just do the things we have always done and do maybe a bit slower, maybe a bit less, but always doing it. So with that in mind, we come down to fractures again and we look at the bone mineral density. Now, everyone talks about bone mineral density, but bone mineral density is actually about 70% of the strength, the resilience, the stiffness of the bones. There are a whole other raft of factors in there. So hence why, as I said earlier, the bone mineral density really only equates to about 50% of the fractures over 55. So there are other factors that are really important to understand. Things like your mineral balance, the different minerals that are actually in your bones, your microarchitecture, the rates of bone turnover, and bone generally turns over very slowly, but when you put more stress on it, they turn over faster, which is what we're looking at here. And a whole raft of other things other than just bone mineral density, which is what they measure when they will tell you that you've got osteoporosis or osteopenia and so on. And then that takes us back to here and it says, okay, so what can we do? Well, the reality is, as we've aged, we've lost a lot of that ability to build a lot of bone mineral density. In fact, we find that something like 93-94% of our bone mineral density is already determined by the age of 16 years. Now, that doesn't mean you stop and go, oh no, because even small changes can make a big difference. And what we're definitely trying to do is, first of all, at every age, is reduce bone loss. Every age, and so that means everybody has to get up there, and the older you get, the more you actually have to focus and say, let's reduce bone mineral density. What do I do? What are the exercises? What are the activities? What's the diet and nutrition and lifestyle program that mixes all together in there? So, but even a small increase, a little increase of 2 to 4% of bone mineral density leads to a 50% reduction in the risk of fractures over the age of 55. So even a small increase, a couple of percent, 2, 3, 4, even 1%, they all make a big difference. All different activities have an impact on your bone mineral density. And we start at the top here. Sedentary one has a negative impact. If you're sitting around, laying around, not actually actively getting out there and doing things, then you are losing bone mineral density at the fastest possible rate. Now, of course, combine that with the poor nutrition that most people have, hence why we have a lot of these literal pandemics around the world based on the poor sedentary 21st century lifestyle. Then you've got swimming and cycling, very low impact, but do have a benefit in reducing the rate at which you lose bone mineral density, and that's really getting the movement going, the blood flowing, and some of the issues I raised a bit earlier. And then you've got, again, walking. The slower you walk, the less benefit you get. So the rate that they've suggested is about 4.8 kilometres per hour, and lower than that you have a mild benefit. Walking faster than that, you get a better benefit, a higher benefit. So it comes in handy to actually just learn to walk a little bit faster. And of course, a bit of walking with some intermittent running, beneficial. When you start to run, you take bigger steps, greater impact, more use of the muscles. So it has that win-win situation. Jogging obviously increases. Sprinters have very high density bones, very strong bones, low risk fractures as a result of the impact that they have. And because it's a sudden burst which gets the muscles going, and that impact every time that foot hits the ground, a huge impact going through those the feet, the legs, and the whole body as a result of it. And that would be with any of those sports that are very fast, very high, and very intensive. And then you've got weight-bearing exercise and resistance. Everyone talks about being the epitome, the peak of what you should be doing. And the more you lift, the stronger you get, the bigger the bones, because you're actually, when you're doing the work, so you're working the muscles there, you've got the muscles actually pulling on the bone and stressing the bone. And so when you stress that bone, it's actually causing it to grow. Bone mineral density increases, risk of fractures. So weight bearing and resistance. And then you've got your impact exercises, and particularly ones like jumping and hopping. And some very interesting studies there, but just jumping up and down, the higher you jump, obviously the greater the impact, then the greater the bone mineral density. And the hopping studies, which have been done over the last 15 years or so, have shown that's probably the single best activity that you can do. Probably because all of your force is going down one side at each time. So you're hopping, and all of the gravitational force is basically going down all there, and all of your joints are being worked at least on the side you're hopping. Which brings me to an experiment that they did recently, well, 5 years ago or so, and they found that if you hopped on one side, they got a group of postmenopausal women, and they hopped on one side. And that hopping on one side built the bone mineral density on the side of the hopping, and the other side lost bone mineral density, showing that it's site-specific. That's one of the, I'll repeat that a few times in the next few minutes, but site-specific. So if you use your right side, you get higher bone mineral density. If you don't use your left side, then you don't get it, you lose bone mineral density. And so it was a very good study in terms of showing over months the benefit of hopping on one side. And in that one, the hopping one, they were doing about 50 hops a day. And it started off as 5 hops by 10 times, and then 10 hops by 5 times. And then many of the people a month or so in were doing 50 hops at a time. Now, we probably all did that when we were younger. We just have to retrain ourselves to be able to do some simple hopping exercise. Now, the other interesting aspect about this is that in some of the hopping studies, they've found that the direction at which you hop has an impact. It's that site-specific. So in the hopping exercise, it's hop to the front, hop to the back, hop to the right, hop to the left. And obviously the higher you hop and the more weight you're carrying in terms of extra weight, not body weight, not fat and so on, the better it is, more gravitational force. And with all this, it's really important to understand that there are risks, as I've already highlighted, of doing some damage when you exercise. That's why it's always best to at least start off with a professional trainer. Tell them what you want, work out what fits in with you, and of course doing lots of these little things on the side. For example, if you want to just start hopping around, but be careful, be careful, be careful, because there are always added risks. So hopping left, right, front, back, great exercise, builds bone mineral density and reduces the risk of fractures. Then we get on to the type of sports that have shown up, and the sports that show up best in terms of bone mineral density tend to be your volleyball, basketball, football, tennis, and gymnastics. And the reason they are is because, again, they're involving movement, they've got the resistance training, but they've also got that impact in all of the games, whether it's basketball, volleyball, or soccer. People are running around, stopping, fasting, going, twisting, turning, and every time that is done, there are these extra G's, gravitational forces going through those joints, building up bone mineral density and reducing the risk of fracture for something like up to 10 years after retiring from those exercises. So great sports to be involved in, great sports to get kids involved in, to get those bone mineral density before it starts to, well, level out or even decline. Now, I've also written here wrist, because the wrist is, first of all, a bit of a neglected area, and the upper arm is pretty well neglected in terms of a lot of people's activities, and yet wrist strength is so important. First of all, I remember my mum used to open up all the jars when we were kids. We couldn't open them, and we'd pass them to mum and go, "Wow, mum, you open them." 20, 30 years later, we'd be visiting mum, and mum would go, "I can't open it," and we'd open it. She'd go, "Oh, they put these lids on tough nowadays, don't they?" No, we lose wrist strength. Really important to do lots of wrist exercises, but also when it comes to bone mineral density, if you fall, your wrist and your elbow and your arm is the first port to actually stop you hitting the ground with full impact, and that's the reflex there. And so what you want to do is make sure your upper arm and your wrist has a lot of strength there with the muscles, and increased bone mineral density, decreased risk of fracture, increased bone strength. So very important. Don't do up here and your legs and so on and ignore your wrist. Build some wrist exercises in there. So we've got this. Now the critical thing then comes to how much, how often, when, where, and we'll make a few more specific suggestions later on. But duration, the research is it's a 20-minute minimum. And that's not just 20 minutes of hopping for obvious reasons, but it's about getting that movement and the metabolism going, and a little bit of resistance, building those three activities I mentioned earlier on one go. So a minimum 20 minutes at a time. The minimum in the studies suggests that a minimum of 20 minutes twice a week, and these are minimum. What can you do maximum? 7 times 20 minutes, 7 times 30 minutes, depending on what you're doing. And like I do, I build them into my lifestyle. So I walk as far and to as many places as I can. When I go shopping, I'm actually carrying the shopping home, so I get that weight-bearing exercise on the way while I'm doing things. And intensity is important. And for both muscle mass, building muscle and maintaining strong muscles, and bone mineral density and reducing risk of fractures, you actually need to increase the weights which you are working with. And so jumping is great, hopping is better because it's one side, and then if you get to a point, then you can also add weights, and there are weighted vests, and they vary in cost from anywhere from $40 to $400, and the great thing is you can add a little bit of weight. And in the studies where they've looked at them, and they're very effective, you can use just a normal backpack if you like as well, but the weighted vests are effective because you can start off with a couple of kilograms or a couple of pounds, depending on what country you're in, and add them on every couple of days, every week, whatever, add another kilogram on. And so it's increasing that resistance. You might get up to even 10 or even 20 kilograms of extra weight that you're carrying around. Now, the great thing about the vest is that you can also walk around anywhere, and you're getting increased impact with every step you're doing. Lots of things like that can make a little benefit over a long period of time is what you're really after. So the combination, and it then comes down to what's going to fit you and suit you. So what is going to work best for you? There's some studies coming out recently showing that combined activities are by far the best. It's just an extra percentage on, but that percentage, as I've already highlighted, is really critical and beneficial. And they've got people to do something like 10,000 steps, and that's at plus 4.8 kilometers per hour generally, 60 jumps or hops like I've suggested already, and 24 push-ups. So it works the upper body and the lower body as well. And those push-ups aren't against the ground, they're actually against the wall. So you can get that extra benefit there of leaning forward, but you can go lower down to get that extra bit of impact too. And you can just push off a little bit to get that impact of your hands hitting the floor or hitting the surface that you're working from as well. Now, they tend to call these exercises, or group of exercises now, things like high intensity resistance impact training. So that's going to the gym and lifting some weights. And I've got my little weights here, these ones. And you can do the lifting of the weights, but also just when you want a bit more impact, you can jump with the weights. How simple is that? Of course, that's hopping as well, left and right, make sure you get everything, and a little bit of movement in there. The great thing is this is really simple. Everyone can do it. These are really, really cheap to get and available just about anywhere. So the message is you need to build the program that suits you. Now, when it comes to activities, because I like building the weight bearing and the bone building material or exercise and activities into my day. And the single best activity I actually think for it is stairs. Because when you climb stairs, you get resistance training. And I do a couple of talks on cruise ships on a regular basis. And going up and down those stairs, you really feel the working out on your legs, on your quadriceps, your hamstrings and quadriceps. And then going down the stairs, you actually get a lot of impact. So if you get the opportunity, anywhere you get the opportunity, go up and downstairs. I will always remember this video of watching people going into the gym. It was one level up and they all took the escalator to go to the gym. Hold on. So do the stairs. If you've got a chance, even take the lift up and walk down, because it gives you that impact on the way down. And it doubles the amount because you're going down at the same time. So stairs are absolutely fantastic. So you need to build in something that's going to fit you, get a professional assistance in the beginning, read up a lot more about it. I've got a lot more information on osteoporosis and bone density with all those other videos I've got right through from food. And remember, it's about a combination of these. Now, the last part of this is some of the other bits that I hinted at, for example, warmth, vibration and eating. But I want to touch on yoga and Tai Chi, because everyone says, but isn't that good? The research on yoga and Tai Chi is suggesting it has a mild benefit. The studies aren't jumping up and down and saying, well, hey, this is really, really fantastic for it, but there's probably a mild benefit. And the problem with those studies is it's hard to get that precise study methodology and that done in things like Tai Chi, a blinded study. So the message is, yes, they're of mild benefit at the moment. Maybe the research will show that they're better. It will depend on the type of yoga, the type of activity you're doing. Then we get to warmth, and the temperature shows it at 34 degrees. So if you can find a nice warm environment, 34 degrees, and just soak those joints in that 34 degree for as long as possible. Here they were looking at the epidemiology, where they actually got, we're looking at people in warmer climates who have a bigger bone density when they compared them to like-minded groups in that area and so on. And they also did some work on mice, which is where they found out the 34 degrees. And they put mice, and the mice in the 34 degree climate chamber had higher bone mineral density. But what's really interesting in this one is that they then took the poo, the feces from the warm bone mice, and put them in the cold bone mice, and the cold bone mice improved as well, which is linking back to all the other research I've told you about, why gut health is so important. And then finally, eating. And there were a couple of studies that have looked at bone mineral density in people who have unregulated blood sugar levels. These are pre-diabetic, diabetes, people who don't have, who have insulin resistance, a whole raft of the population. In the mature age population in Western countries, it's about 50% of the population. And what they found was that insulin plays a significant role, and I've highlighted this in some of my other videos. Insulin resistance, in other words, the body's inability to control the blood sugar levels, so having you get a spike. Even when you eat something that's not necessarily sugar, you get a spike. And that insulin resistance can play a big role in losing bone mineral density, the oxidation inflammation. And so when they had people who were insulin resistant and they had the meal and then went and exercised, doing the weight bearing and the impact and the metabolic activity, they actually had more bone mineral density in those people who did it compared to those who did it after, who did the exercise then ate. And so the exercise itself helped balance out the blood sugar level. Now, if you don't want to do it after, if you don't want to do the exercise after you've just eaten and so on, just make sure you get some activity. And I've talked about this in lots of my other videos, that it really does. Whenever I've had a big meal, I really do like going for a little walk or doing some intensive activity to help my body deal with any of those excesses, e.g. sugar, that we absorb in there. So the message is, you can work out what you need, but eating before exercise can be a benefit. Now, what are you going to do? That's really up to you. You really need to sit down with some professionals, some friends, some of your mates, so you can actually work out what they do, what you do, and add in some of the science that I've been able to show you now. We've got lots of other videos on osteoporosis. There's at least another 10 videos on aspects of osteoporosis to really build your bone mineral density in conjunction with the physical activity. Check them out, and of course subscribe to the channel and share this information.